Peace and blessings, family. This is your brother, Asar Imhotep, with the Madu Mandela Institute for the Advancement of Science and Culture. And this is the Mbongi. And today we have another open discussion along the lines of my personal book recommendations for those coming into consciousness and need a firm foundation in knowledge acquisition in regards to knowledge of self. So, more when we return in just a moment. Yes. We are back. Today is, what is today? Thursday, January the 7th, 2021. And it is the day after the attempted coup. And, we can say a lot about that. But of course, me being a student of history, a Pan-Africanist and Africologist, nothing surprises me in regards to these individuals here in these United States of America. But today is not about politics per se. It's about scholarship and my personal guide to setting a firm foundation for one's ongoing autodidactic studies into Africology and African history, African psychology, et cetera, American history, et cetera, et cetera. So I appreciate everyone for joining. Of course, those of you who are listening live, and then those of you who are catching the archives. So big ups and respect to all of you who are in YouTube land, and big up and respect to the Facebook massive. Again, those catching the archives and then those catching us live. And, this is a platform where we like to share information and do powerful interviews. And we do that on different levels. And as always, I like to promote a way in which you can support this particular channel. And that is through the Patreon page. And that's patreon.com/Asar Imhotep. And you will get exclusive behind the scenes of the upcoming film. Once I start shooting the preliminaries for that, as well as, you'll be supporting the channel itself and helping it to grow. So we have big plans for this channel, and we want to move it beyond, what we're currently doing now. And we can only do that with your support. So consider, joining the platform, and, there's certain gifts for certain levels. And, you can visit that link so you can get more information in regards to that. And part of the perks, besides the gifts that you'll see on the platform, is exclusive and or early access videos. And so an early access interview is with Dr. Zulu Matabo Zulu out of South Africa, Azania, who's a computer scientist, historian, and poet. We currently have an interview of him up at the moment. We also have um, Dr. Andrew Jaggs, who is an Africologist and who recently did his PhD dissertation on the methods for establishing a relationship between the Yoruba and ancient Egyptian cultures. And so that is a powerful interview that you want to check out. And that is exclusively on currently on the Patreon page. But we just finished interviewing on Tuesday, and this is freely available to everyone on YouTube. So just in case you missed it, we had a powerful discussion with Dr. Amin Saba Sakana, out of originally out of Trinidad, but who resides in the UK, and he himself is a poet, a playwright, a historian, and the creator and publisher of the institute and the publishing house, Carnegie House Publishing. And so, I encourage everyone who has not seen that interview to check that out. And on Saturday, I will be having an interview. This will be for the Patreon members, but with Dr. Dukaya, and he is an Egyptologist out of, well, he lives in Paris right now, but he's back and forth between Paris and Cameroon, a native Douala speaker, and doing some major works. He is with what is this, the African Institute of Egyptology, that he created. And, he's in the community teaching folks how to read and write and access the meta nature. And so, it's not just academic works for him. He is continuing that legacy. So we'll be having that interview. We're scheduled to interview on Saturday. And so, by either Saturday evening and or Sunday, I should have the video posted up for those Patreon members. And so I want to again thank each and every one of you. And I would request that all of you like this particular show, and don't forget to share it. So if you're on Facebook watching this, please share the show. And if you are on YouTube watching it, please share the show. And, drop a comment, say what's up. Let me know that you're in the house. I see Donnie Williams. I see that's that good guy. I saw Any Harriet Kalfani, Tamika One, Sean Polidori, Brother Chavez, H-Town in the building, Can't Get Right, Ivan Vasquez Teles, I think he added a component to his name, Per Unk, and Infinite Minds, who have made themselves known in the YouTube chat. And I see Brother Conan Lee, all the way from the UK. I want to thank you for joining us all the way out there. I know it's late and you could be asleep, but you have decided to hang out with us. And so it is greatly appreciated. Thank you very much. And so without further ado, I will get started. Don't want to make it a too long show. So way back in like 2007, I believe it was, I had created this coming into consciousness book reading list. And, every now and then I will update it. And, a recent conversation with our good brother Black Panther with the Masu Warrior clan on, just having a conversation like we usually do when we having those private chats about, what people are learning when they're coming into consciousness and what we can contribute to their development and things of that nature. And it reminded me, because I forgot that I even did this list. So I went back and found my list, and there was a few things, of course, I had to update and change. And so this is my updated list, my updated coming into consciousness list as of January 7th, 2021. So without further ado, big ups to OG Gorilla. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to share my screen, and let me see. um, Let me go all the way back to the beginning. So boom. Um, so hopefully everyone can see these. Okay. So, over the years, the motivation behind this list is that over the years, as the more and more that, I was teaching, whether at the university level or in the general community, I would find myself in these conversations, and rightfully so, with uh, people from all walks of life and all different ages. And you when you are out in the community and you are teaching, you can't assume that everyone is on the same level and has the same foundational grounding. And so, many of you know that, uh, you know, I've always been an autodidact, but I double minored in African studies and African American studies. And so the only reason why I didn't pursue a degree at the university that I was in is because it had not, they just had a program there, but they did not have a department. And so, uh, I was in computer information systems with a minor in those two. And then actually, it kind of, I've told this story before because I first came into accounting. And so when I was in accounting, I had to take uh, African studies, but I didn't know that African studies was different from African American studies at the University of Houston. So I took all African American studies courses, and it was like, none of these count towards your degree. You have to take African studies. And so I had to do a whole another 12 hours of African studies. And so ultimately it helped me in the long run, but it hit me in those pockets. So, and of course it added on to my time. So, but there's a lot of us in the community who either, don't have those study groups and or didn't get that formal education at the college level and have been introduced to some of these foundational works. And because of that, when they get some knowledge of self, or they have this interest for knowledge of self, they are kind of scattered. They're not focused on, and they don't know where to go. And because of that, they're grabbing just any and everything that sounds like it could be legit, and that will help them in the long run. And so what ends up happening is that, those who are logical and right minded and open minded, is that they will grab all of this information, but then they will find themselves having to unlearn a lot of what they learned, because a lot of the pseudo information had gotten in. And so what we want to do is try to reduce and, matter of fact, eliminate that process so that we put everyone on a firm grounding, and then they can expand from there once they've got that good information, that they can further and more specialize in their personal studies. And so this is the motivation behind this list. So all of the books that I'm going to recommend here are works that I have read myself personally, and I will explain why I think these are relevant and essential reads for your development. And of course, there are a lot of you who, you've been in this for a while, and so some of these you may have read, some of these you may have not. And so this will be kind of a recommendation for you as well, if you haven't come across these works. And so again, I appreciate all of you for joining, and we'll get started. And again, just want to, just in case you missed that announcement, and thanks to all the new Patreons members, who have recently joined. You can support this channel at patreon.com/AsarimHotep, and or you could support by going to asarimhotep.com and giving a donation on the asarimhotep.com homepage. So I don't want to just give you some books without context, because what is actually missing from a lot of our discourse, especially when you're talking about people who are just coming into the knowledge of self and who are hungry for information, is that we don't give them a context for why this information is relevant to them. What are they reading for? And so in my village, Third Ward, H-Town, we have a framework, a series of questions that we ask, and then this is the guide for the type of material that we study. And so we say that there's 4 fundamental questions that you have to answer for yourself. And so the books that I will be recommending will help give you that foundation to be able to answer for yourself each one of these questions. So the questions are, who am I? And that CIC at the top is for coming into consciousness. So these are the coming into consciousness questions to be answered. So the first question, of course, is, who am I? Then the second question, where did I come from? Third, what is my purpose? And lastly, what must I do to fulfill that purpose? And so these are the questions that you should be asking yourself, because you have to have some purpose and you have to have some direction for what you're reading. You're not reading for reading's sake so that you can have an argument on YouTube or with folks on Facebook or other social mediums. You're answering these questions for yourself, because how these questions are answered for yourself will determine how you will use the information. So when you're having these discussions with your children, with folks in the community, I recommend that you always start the conversations with individuals by asking them these 4 questions. And of course, they don't have to answer that immediately. You're just giving them the 4 questions so that they have a purpose for studying, because it's all about understanding oneself and then ultimately one's purpose, and then utilizing that information to fulfill one's purpose. Because the general African consensus is that the African human being incarnated in this time and space to fulfill a mission. And so there are indigenous ways in which people were, certain African groups went about culturally to help answer that question for an individual. But this is the way that we would do this in a modern Western context, outside of those indigenous, models. And so again, this is the 4 questions that you should ask yourself. And so with that said, y'all know that I like to shape and use the wisdom of the Congo cosmogram to provide a visual stimulus and a visual context for what it is that we do, because this symbol represents a plethora of things. But most importantly, it is the life cycle of conception, birth, maturity, and death. And so it is within that same framework that we are going to organize our coming into consciousness book list or reading list. And so, this is the Congo cosmogram. And as you can see in these, it is a circle, but it represents an unwinding spiral where the human being or any living institute is going through this life cycle, represented symbolically by the rising and setting of the sun. And so going counterclockwise, you have 4 stages. And so you have Vangama, Vaika, Vanga, and Vunda. But it serves multiple purposes in the Bantu Congo context. So they also talk about this in terms of Musoni, in terms of Kala, which means to be, and the Tukula, maturity stage, and the Luvemba, the graying or transitioning stage into the next phase. And so it is these 4 types of demarcations that we're going to utilize. So within that, I created our own African American ontological cosmogram. And I think I've done I've had some conversations concerning the notion that ontology, or what we call entoology, is the basis of all studies, by trying to learn how things be and how things become. So as you can see here, in the V1 and V2, V3, and V4 positions, I've asked those 4 fundamental questions that we were introduced to at the beginning of our talk. And so V1 stands for who am I, or ask the question, who am I, in the conceptualization V. And then in the coming into being V is where have I been? Where did I come from? And then in the third V, ask the question, what is my purpose? And then of course, V4, what must I do to fulfill that purpose? But since we're talking about being, this notion of being, I've asked these questions in a different way. And so that, African American speech has, these different ways of being. And I think I've done a whole show, so I won't go through the details of all of that, but we can restate these questions as who I be, where have I been, who and what, who or what am I becoming, and then lastly, what must be done. So, these are just different ways of asking the same questions, and to kind of put a different spin and light on it. So, so with that said, every series of books is going to be under one of these V's. So there are a total of 16 book recommendations. And in each V, or in each section, is going to be 4 book recommendations. Now, with the exception of the first book and the last book, any of the other books you can read in any order in that stage. But ideally, my recommendation is to read the first 4 books in V1 in the Musoni stage before going on into V2 to read those books, because they all kind of set up each other. But there's also overlap. But for the most part, each set of 4 books, pushes you and prepares you for the next set of 4 books. And I try to strike a balance between, very short books and ones that are a little bit more lengthy. And I also considered the availability of the books and the pricing of the books. So a lot of these books are kind of general and encompassing, because I didn't want to kind of shift you into a narrow, for example, political orientation or a religious orientation, with the exception of 1 or 2 books. But I'll explain why I did that when we get to them. So some of these books you can get through in a day, or say in a weekend, and some it may take you a week or two to go through them. But definitely not the last book. But so we will get started right now. So the first stage, of course, is the Musoni stage, which asks the question, who am I? And so the books that I recommend for this tier, answers or helps you to begin to answer the questions of who you are as a person, and what characteristics or what things should I pay attention to when I'm trying to discover myself or try to articulate who I am as a person. So the first 2 books, and as I mentioned, there's only 2 books that I recommend that you read in the order in which I stated. And so the first book is, even though it's on the right here as the second book, is Know Thyself by Dr. Naim Akbar. And this is a good text because it frames for you from a Black psychology perspective in terms of asking questions about who you are fundamentally. It sets you up for the deeper studies, and especially going into the second stage of this series. And so Know Thyself, Naim Akbar, is the first book. So this is the first book that I recommend you give everyone, because ultimately, all of this is about knowing yourself. And so if you start off with this, everything else is going to relate to that fundamental question. And so the second book, and that's a pretty thin book, you can get through that very quickly. The second book is by John Henrik Clarke, Dr. John Henrik Clarke, and that is My Life in Search of Africa. And the reason why I chose this book is because it mirrors a lot of our story, even if it didn't play out the same way. And so this is Dr. Clarke's, it's a small text, but he's giving the details of his life and the motivations for him that drove him in terms of his search for Africa, his search of knowledge of self and meaning of life. And within this small text, you will, at least it did this for me, and I would assume this would do the same for you, is that you're going to see your journey. But it also sets the precedence for that, regardless that, this book list is not recommending or arguing that you are Moors, that you are Hebrew Israelites, that you are some Asiatics or some kind of, Native Americans that have been here 30,000 years, but are somehow Moors too, and, and spread around. No, it's My Life in Search of Africa. And so we're setting you up to understanding your African self and what it means to be both human and African, and to be one's best self as such in that regard. And so Dr. John Henrik Clarke's story will help you, will humanize the journey you're about to go on, so that you understand that this is not simply an academic enterprise or an exercise, that you're learning this information to learn more about yourself and to learn more about your gifts, to learn more about your history, and so that you can do great things on earth and leave a legacy for your offspring, and to improve the community and to make the world more beautiful, more beautiful than when you found it. And so those are the first two books. So you start off with Know Thyself, and then you can kind of go in any order from this, but you Know Thyself, Naim Akbar, with the foreword by Dr. Asa Hilliard, should be the first book that you read. Okay. So secondly, I'll start from left this time, is The Healing Wisdom of Africa by Dr. Malidoma Patrice Somé. And this is one of the books that I said that I'm, it's the exception to my argument before. I'm reading the comment here. It says somebody on Amazon wants almost $1,000 for that. No, you can find the book in other places. And so y'all got to remember that there's more places to buy books than Amazon.com. So search for the print. Search for the publisher, and or call Black bookstores. Look for Black bookstores and other bookstores, across the country. So there's more than Amazon. So people trying to win on Amazon. So, okay, going back to what I was saying. So The Healing Wisdom of Africa, finding life's purpose through nature, ritual, and community. Now, this is a very important text, not only because it gives you an indigenous initiated perspective on a particular African culture. But more specifically, they give you an indigenous guide for learning oneself. So you know how like we have the so-called zodiac signs, and a lot of us, you know, like myself, who was born on July 31st, talking about I'm a Leo, and then you know there's certain characteristics that come with being born as a Leo. Well, we have indigenous ways of doing that. And so in the Daguerre tradition, you know, depending upon the year you were born, you belong to a particular element. And they have 5 elements in the Daguerre tradition, which is fire, water, earth, mineral, and I believe air. And so you got to look at the Daguerre wheel, and you'll see these particular elements. But those elements also have certain characteristics that are associated with people who are born, you know, in that particular year. And so this gives you that perspective, but it more so gives you a guide for learning oneself, to dealing with one's purpose. So like I said, these books kind of overlap, you know, because it's finding life purpose. And of course, the last purpose, the last set of books deals with the question of what must I do to fulfill that purpose. And then the third set is, you know, what is my, or the second one is what is my purpose. And oh, my bad. That's the third one. Yeah. What is my purpose? And then what must I do to fulfill that purpose? So this text here, along with Naim Akbar's, will get you into seeking knowledge of self in terms of who you are personally, and uh, what are the gifts that you have come to earth with to share with others. And you know, you can see if I see brother Any Herod saying that, you know, it's accurate. And I'm a mineral person according to the Daguerre. And so for those of y'all who have the text already and want to know about mineral people and what you know of me thus far, y'all tell me if it's accurate or not. But so so that's that text, Malidoma Musoni, the healing wisdom of Africa, and it does so much more than what I'm just saying here. But that's one of the main reasons why I put it there. But you'll get into the whole context of what it means to be to heal and be a healer, and community in this context. So it is a very good book to ground yourself with, and then you know it gives you something to kind of compare and contrast with once you expand your studies into other African cultural systems, other wisdom traditions. And so next in this book is by Doctors Parham, Ajamu, and White, and it is The Psychology of Blacks, Centering Our Perspectives in the African Consciousness. Now, this is one of the books that I had to read as an undergrad, and this is the updated, I think I had the first edition. So when the book, it was a few years after the book came out that, you know, I read that one. And I have this one too, but this is the latest one that came out just not too long ago. And so this is, I think, the 4th edition. And so if you look on like Amazon or any other place and you see a different cover than this, those are older versions. This is the latest version with this kind of black and gold, cover, and the statues, in Nubia, on the edge of Nubia, at the top there. So the reason why I recommend this text um, is that you have to ground yourself in African psychology and in Black psychology and the themes coming up from Black psychologists, because they'll help you to properly orient your thinking when you're reading the material um, regarding Black people, but more so, it helps you to kind of contextualize how Black people think and react and respond to the challenges of the world, and to better understand your culture. So when we're talking about who am I, the question who am I is not who am I simply as an individual, as Brother Asar Imhotep. It is who am I, who is Asar Imhotep in community. Because Umuntu Ingamuntu Ingabantu, a person is human through other people. You're not an individual isolated by yourself. You are born into a community, and that community shapes your individuality. And so you got to understand the community you exist in to better understand yourself. And so this helps to answer and the psychological aspects of who we are as a people, and then you can better to understand yourself. So those are the 4 books for the who am I question. So now we go into this, the Kala stage, and we ask the question, where did I come from? And so the first recommendation on the left is An Intro to Black Studies by Dr. Malana Karenga. I think currently right now it's in its 4th edition. And this is, well, especially if you've gone to a program that is an Afrocentric program in college, this is the book that you're going to read in your Intro to Black Studies courses. So you want to be on par with your brothers and sisters, who have taken these courses as a foundational into either a minor in African studies, African American studies, or who go on to major and then ultimately into the PhD. So this is our foundational textbook. So it goes into a long span of history and things of that nature, and it helps you to understand the African American, for example, experience, the diasporic experience, and things to that nature, and just the foundationals of Black studies as a discipline as well. And then you have the text by Dr. Molefe Ketiasanti, and that is The History of Africa, The Quest for Eternal Harmony. And so this is a good foundation. So both of these books here are more broad in terms of answering the questions of where we come from. And so these will articulate for you in very good detail, but they're easy reads. So it's not like you're going to, need super big dictionaries when reading these texts. And so these are foundational texts, and this is what they teach at the universities. This is part of the curriculum of the universities. So I've had to read both of these. And so next comes Africanisms in American Culture, edited by Joseph E. Holloway. And the reason why you want to read this text, one, is going to overlap a little bit with the text, the two texts that I just recommended, the Intro to Black Studies and the text by Molefe Kete Asante on African history. But however, what's different about this, especially, and I know there's others of you who are viewing this from various other parts of the world. And so, although the title may not seem that like it appeals to you, or excuse me, it is associated with you, like if you're in the UK or in Paris, or you're in the Brazil or something to that nature, it does in more ways than you think. And so this is an edited work, so it has many different scholars who are contributing and showing, for example, those African aspects in terms of culture and psychology that you're going to read. Remember those books in the first one having to deal with psychology, Know Thyself, and then the psychology of blacks. And so you'll see more concretely how that manifests in African American culture. And they deal with the Caribbean as well. And they give some insights sometimes. For example, like Robert Ferris Thompson has, an essay or two in there that is relevant. Molefe Kete Asante does one on, he has an essay in this text on the African American vernacular English and how the African languages, inform us about the language, the way that we use language here in the States. And so a lot of this is relevant for, whether you are in the UK or in the United States or on the islands. And so, and then also lastly for this one is slave testimony. 2 centuries of letters, speeches, interviews, and autobiographies, edited by John W. Blasingame. And I've had to read this text, and it is imperative that you read the slave narratives, because you will get a better sense of the trauma that we went through, but also the resilience and the African retentions that were that you'll discover with a careful analysis of the text. So again, these are letters, speeches, interviews, and autobiographies. These are direct testimonies from your enslaved African ancestors. And so, you want to keep this always in mind, because you are the descendants of these individuals whose testimonies they're reading. And so when we're asking ourselves, who am I? And where did I come from? This is who you come from. And so this is also going to lead into, what is my purpose? Because your purpose is going to be connected to their testimony, their experience, grandmama's experience, pawpaw's experiences. Unless you understand them, it's nice. Of course, we want to know about the ancient kingdoms of Ghana and Songhai and ancient Kemet and the stone monuments of Zimbabwe. But you need to understand your family history. And so this will help you to start looking into and wanting to know more about your immediate family. So this should encourage you to start doing genealogies about your family, starting with moms and pops, if they are alive and you have access to them, to grandma, grandpa, aunties and them. Start writing down your history so that you have your own testimonies for your children and your grandchildren, your grandchildren. So this is a very important work. And a lot of us want to try to skip around slavery. No, we go to the heart of it. So get the firsthand accounts of what was going on then from your ancestors themselves. And so we go now to the third section. And it is to the Tukula stage, which asks the question, what is my purpose? And so these particular texts are geared to help you discover your own personal purpose. And again, there's overlap. So, you know, that Malidoma Some text will, you know, start getting you to answer this question. And so you can go further into that. But so of course there is the African cosmology of the Bantu Congo, one of my Mount Rushmore of African texts by Dr. Kimbwadinde Kiabonseki Fukiao. So if you know me and you're not new to this channel or my work, you know that I big up this book and recommend it any opportunity I get. And so this is a text about African cosmology as told by an African initiate of the Bakongo tradition. And it guides you on a more cosmic and more communal context in terms of answering this question, you know, what is my purpose? And so you'll get a great sense of that, you know, reading this text. And this text just covers a lot. This text could be in any one of these categories that I have here, but I just put it here because, you know, when it comes to what is my purpose, this is a question in terms of one's spiritual development. So you've already asked a question, who am I? And, you know, and where did I come from? Now you're asking, what is my purpose? And so now you're looking into the future. And so it is the spiritual context, and especially when it comes to the governance of one's behavior, and tying your purpose to cosmos itself. And so while this is particularly the Bantu Congo perspective, again, it can apply to many African traditions. And so that one is more narrow in terms of the model and examples that you will get. But the next book, The Hero with an African Face, Mythic Wisdom of Traditional Africa, again, is more broad. So you'll hear about Congo and Yoruba and Akan and Ethiopian and Egyptian, you know, wisdom traditions. And again, all of them what's especially good about this text is that, you know, what he's looking at and finding is the hero's journey, because your journey in life is the hero's journey. So, you know, you're that person who is in a lot of our mythological stories who are, you know, coming into knowledge of self and becoming aware and awakened to the world and one's gifts, and having to go through those arduous challenges of life, you know, saying to fight through in order to discover the best of who they are so they can go and fulfill their purpose. So if you understand yourself in your life in context of the hero's journey, then you'll be able to kind of put all of these pieces together and answer for yourself that question, what is my purpose? So we will continue. And so this was the late wife of Dr. Malidoma Some. This was Sobonfu Some. And so in this context of answering the question, the we got to understand again that, who am I and where did I come from, etc., is who am I in community. And so this notion of community and family and purpose is all discussed in this text here, the spirit of intimacy, ancient teachings and the ways of relationships. And so again, while we want to like to talk about empires and trade and science and inventions, at the end of the day, what we're talking about, what we're trying to do is build stronger relationships between the sexes and between the members of the community. So you have to ground yourself in text. And this is a pretty small text. You can get through this, very quickly. Same thing with Fukiao's work. The Hero with an African Face is, take a little bit more time. And the same thing with this next text here, African Critical Theory, Constructing the Black Radical Tradition, from W.B. Du Bois and C.L.R. James to Frantz Fanon and Emile Cabral. And so you're going to have some kind of political consciousness so that you can understand how to use your gifts. And so, matter of fact, the spirit of intimacy and the healing wisdom book from Malidoma Some go hand in hand as far as that purpose, outlining the Daguerre system of discovering one's purpose. But for us, it's always going to be to improve the community. And so you're going to have a political consciousness. And so when you read the works of Du Bois and C.L.R. James, Emile Cabral, Frantz Fanon, and others, you start to get this sense and attachment. And now you're starting to see, in ways in which you can utilize your gifts to improve the lives of African, Americans, if you are an African American, but African people worldwide and in general. So, this is a very important book by Dr. Raylan Rabaka. And so I highly recommend this text for everyone. So now we go on to the last set of books in the Luvemba stage. And it is asking, or these set of books, I believe, will help us to answer, what must I do to fulfill that purpose? So we've asked the question, who am I? What is my purpose? Who am I? Where did I come from? What is my purpose? Now we are asking, what must I do to fulfill that purpose? So now I know who I am. I know where I came from. I have some sense of what I came here to do. Now, how can I apply this knowledge from all the other 9 books that I read previously? So this is what, these set of books, and also I chose these books, these set of books, because these aren't books that leave you without a sense of direction, because all of these have plans. They're essentially plans or workbooks on how to utilize your gifts to solve problems in the African world community. So we have here The Destruction of Black Civilizations, Great Issues of a Race, from 4500 BC to 2000 AD, by the late Dr. Chancellor Williams. And so this text really outlines, and this could have been in the second tier in the college stage, where did I come from? But the reason why this is here last is because it's not only going to tell you where we come from, but it's also an analysis of the conditions that put us in place right now. And it also gives you a plan. There's a plan at the end of the book for being able to free ourselves and to fill in or to correct the issues that led us into the conditions that we find ourselves in today. And this is, an excellent, excellent book. So the second one over here is Sovereign Evolution by Ezra Aharon. The full title is Sovereign Evolution, Manifest Destiny from Civil Rights to Sovereign Rights. And so you're going to see a theme here with all of these books because they all have to deal with sovereignty and how, we're not recommending these books. When the moment that you come into consciousness and you start answering these questions, you have now enlisted into the armed forces. That's what you're doing. So what this is basic training. These are the texts that you have to read as part of your basic training. So you have now enlisted into the military. You have been drafted. And so your mission, if you choose to accept, is to help free African people and to make them sovereign, to be self-sufficient, and to develop power. And so you have to understand what that means. So this text is one that goes under the radar. It's not one of the more well-known texts of our scholars, but I guarantee you that you will have a different perspective on your mission in life after reading this text. And so it'll start to answer questions. Matter of fact, its ability to generate questions for you is what's very important about this work. And so, Sovereign Evolution, Ezra Aharon, and I hope to get him on the program soon. So, on the left, some of you may have heard of Dr. Joy DeGruy and her text, Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, America's Legacy for Enduring Injury and Healing. And so while Sobonfu Some and Malidoma Some's work in many respects deals with indigenous modes of healing, those of us in the diaspora have a unique situation and which recalls for a unique response. And the post-traumatic slave syndrome will help you to understand. So this text I link also with the Psychology of Blacks that I mentioned earlier by Parham, Ajamu, and White. And so with this, it not only helps you to understand the issues from and the psychological trauma as a result of the transatlantic slave holocaust, it should help you to understand your people. Because once you go out into the community and you start having conversations with us, you will understand excuse me, that, you know, you're going to get a lot of backlash for the perspectives that you hold and the positions that you take and the sense of culture and pride that you adopt. But you shouldn't get angry at your people. You should understand that we are suffering from undiagnosed and untreated traumas. And so not only does this text, of course, articulate this very well, it is one of those, you know, it's an easy read, but it also has a plan for how we can heal ourselves. So you're going to have to do some self-healing yourself before you can really go out into the community and engage the community. Because you're going to have to be able to empathize with your fellow man and be able to, your fellow man and woman, and be able to articulate and be able to engage, you know, just different levels of people. And so, you know, those who are college educated, you know, those who are scientific versus those who are in you know, more social work, you know, settings versus the plumber and the mechanic and the hair shop woman. You know, we have different socioeconomic backgrounds, and you're going to have to be able to engage and understand these traumas and these triggers, so that when you are teaching, you know how to engage and penetrate the heart chakra, you know, of, you know, the community. And so, and understand that this is, we're not studying to, and excuse my language, to shit on people who don't know what we know. We are studying, first of all, to know who we are, and so that we know how to better direct our gifts so that we can help our community heal and become more powerful. And so that's what this particular book does. And so now this last book is the last book that I recommend, not only because of the quality of the book, but because of how thick it is. So this is going to be the thickest book, you know, of you know, this recommendation. So, you know, I don't want to start off. So by now, if you've gone through all these texts and you get to the Blueprint for Black Power, a moral, political, and economic imperative for the 21st century by the late Dr. Amos Wilson, you have built up some stamina, you know, in terms of reading. But it's a very engaging and interesting read. You're going to want to read, you know, this text from beginning to end. Now, because this was published in, you know, in '98 posthumously, you know, some of the statistical data, you know, will have changed, but that would not, you know, have any bearing on the essential arguments. And so again, all 4 books that are in this "What Must I Do to Fulfill My Purpose" question stage, this Luvemba stage, they all have plans. And so now you see these plans here, and you're able to say, okay, you know, this is how I'm going to direct it. But more importantly, with this last text, it is a blueprint for what? Black power. And so we got to understand that ultimately we are doing this so that we can gain power for our people, because with power, you can respond more appropriately to the challenges, that seek to annihilate your community. And so we have to, that's why Ezra Aharon's book and basically all these books, are very important on this particular question. So so we're going to have a quick recap of the text that was recommended. So on the question of who am I, we start off with Know Thyself, Dr. Naim Akbar. And then again, it's not in any order after that, but The Psychology of Blacks, 4th edition, Doctors Parham, Ajamu, and White. African Healing and Wisdom, Dr. Malidoma Somé. My Life in Search of Africa, Dr. John Henry Clark. The Kala, Where Did I Come From? Introduction into Black Studies, Dr. Malana Karenga. Africanisms in American Culture, Dr. Joseph Holloway. The History of Africa, 3rd edition, Dr. Molefe Kete-Asante. And lastly, Slave Testimony by Dr. John W. Blasingame, or Blasingame. I've never heard it actually pronounced. And so on the 3rd stage is the Tukula, and we ask the question, what is my purpose? And my recommendations is African Cosmology of the Bantu Congo, Africana Critical Theory, Hero with an African Face, The Spirit of Intimacy, and of course this is by Dr. Fukiao, Dr. Rabaka, Clyde Ford, and Sabonfu Somé, in that order. And the last stage was Luvemba. And in even though I have it listed here first, this is the book you're supposed to read last, and that is Blueprint for Black Power, Dr. Amos Wilson, The Destruction of Black Civilizations, Dr. Chancellor Williams, Sovereign Evolution, Ezra Aharon, and Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, Dr. Joy DeGruy. Now, I know, like, if everybody makes their own list, that they'll have, different texts and probably in a different order. These are my recommendations based on my 20 plus years of engaging the conscious community and dealing with people on all levels, all ages, all levels of income and income disparity and the like. And so if it is my belief that if you have these as your foundation, you can avoid, falling into the pseudo pit of eternal hell. And that's what we're trying to do. But of course, again, these texts are in the framework of answering the 4 fundamental questions of life. Who am I? Where did I come from? What is my purpose? And what must I do to fulfill that purpose? And so, from these are just foundational general works. And then, you can hopefully that you have gotten enough information that when you continuing, because this is an ongoing, you're going to be studying for the rest of your life. So, but your interest is going to be more narrow as you get older. And so, all of the other books that I could recommend are just specializations. So you notice I ain't recommend any Egyptology books and things on particular, with the exception of the Daguerre tradition. But, I'm not trying to get you to join Ifa or the Akan system or some, Afro-Christianity or something to that nature. That's your own personal journey. There are other books. I'm setting this foundation so that you have a good academic grounding to be able to evaluate other texts from this point on. So if it is my belief that if the conscious community would ground themselves in these texts, and when they expand and build their library, they they you know, will understand and know what are the serious works, and and how to utilize all of that or whatnot. So, you know, in the spirit of the Bai and Kole, the eminent and powerful people, you know, that is my recommendation. And then, of course, you know, y'all can get Aluja Volume 2 and, you know, towards a comparative dictionary of Chicam and modern African languages. But these are, you know, some more advanced works beyond, you know, those that was recommended. So that is the end of my recommendations. And so I will not ask, but I will answer a few questions if y'all have any questions. So let me, I haven't been paying attention to uh, the chat, but if y'all have any questions for me or comments, you know, let me know um, what y'all think of my recommendations for coming into consciousness. So again, this is a coming into consciousness. And so if you guys have been there for a while, you know, this may not necessarily appeal. But again, like I said, some of these texts, some of y'all may have not read. And, you know, to continue and expand, you know, your reading, you know, those texts that you don't have, you know, they'll be good solidifying and foundational works for you as well. So, hold on. Asar, why no Garvey, bro? Again, the framework in which I did it, I only had 16 books. And Garvey is a specialization, but it is an older text. And you're going to need some newer texts that puts the older ones into perspective. So when you know you start getting to Garvey, I don't have any W.E. Du Bois in there either. I don't have Carter G. Woodson. Um, you know, this is, you know, these are specialized works. And so I try to avoid things that you would need a particular type of specialization to really kind of get. And so that's why, you know, like I try to do more summary, more academic general works, like, you know, the Africana critical theory, which kind of touches on a lot of that. You'll get some knowledge of self in terms of Garvey when you read Intro to Black Studies and Molefe Kitty Asante's book on the on African Africana history. So I chose texts where, again, this is for people who are coming into consciousness, and so they will get Garvey in the text, and so so that's why it's important to read the text. So so once you have read these texts, again, some of these are texts that I've read in the course of my African studies and African American studies on the collegiate level, and a lot of folks don't have that foundation. And so when you read about Garvey in Malefe's book or Malana Karenga's books, then you can go and read, for example, the philosophies and opinion of Malcolm X, or you can read the not Malcolm X of Marcus Garvey. Then you can read Malcolm X's autobiography, or you can read, Frantz Fanon and all these other people. Notice I didn't recommend Obinga or Shekanti Job. You have to be grounded and built for some of these things. And these are foundational works that help you to do that. And I just not throwing you out there and not understanding context. And so you can't read Garvey unless you understand the historical context from which Garvey emerges. Let me see. Uh, 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 I don't know what y'all talking about here. Hold on. He says, Conan Lee asked the question: is the person coming into consciousness is a tabula rasa, a blank slate in your mind? Not necessarily, but the it is. I have the blank slate in mind person, or the blank slate person in mind when I have this text, because everyone comes with a history. They may be coming out of being a Hebrew Israelite, being in the Nation of Islam, or just being a Christian. And so you come with baggage, or you not baggage. I shouldn't say it that way, even though ones could consider these baggage. You come with a history. You come with some. You're not just, unless you're talking about babies. You don't come completely ignorant of of who you are and things. Again, these are foundational works. They put you in a particular type of perspective, and it puts the history in a context for when you do more specialized study. And so you can't just read Garvey just all willy-nilly. You have to have a historical context to understand where Marcus Garvey is, because you might be put off by Garvey and his and his downing of indigenous African people. But if you are warned beforehand, like in the intro to Black Studies, and it puts it in the context, and you can respect the age that Garvey was in, or when you're reading W.B. Du Bois's work and understand that he lived to damn near be 100, and that he was growing and changing his perspectives as he got older. Like, you only get that from texts that are designed to put a context on the history of people. Then you go deep. And so I'm coming from a perspective of a teacher. So if I have a course, an introduction to Africana Studies course, these are the types of books that I would recommend for the course. That this is my curriculum, because I understand what you're going to have to know before you go on to learn this other stuff. Because if I give you Diop, you're not going to understand Diop just coming into consciousness. You got to understand why that is important. All of that is explained. That's why we write textbooks. And so, the philosophies and opinions of Marcus Garvey is not a textbook, but the Intro to Black Studies is. The history of Africa is a textbook. It is designed for college courses. So is the Psychology of Blacks. It's designed for college courses. And so I hope that answers the question. And let me see. Um, Appreciate you for joining, and thank you for your comment. Brian Thomas. Let's see. Let me see. Good to see you never inserted any. He says, "Good to see you never inserted any of your books in it." No, I would not be that vain unless I actually wrote a text. Now, in the future, I will have a text that is recommended in that, and is titled Kimoyo. And so when people are, looking for texts to better understand African religion and spirituality, it's not many good texts that 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 tells you exactly what African spirituality is. And that's something that I'm preparing and writing. But, but those texts that I recommended already are a good thing. So let's see. To address your last statement, though, I'm asking specifically so that people will know what not to trust and why, instead of thinking it has to be a minefield of info. Hold on, I got to go up now. Uh, yeah, y'all having like I've had to go all the way back up to get to y'all conversation, so I'm gonna go back down. Why isn't Bezos? I think I answered that already. Um, so you have to explain what bad means and why. W.B. Du Bois is your collective book. I don't even understand this question. If you can rewrite it. Yeah, he didn't say Obenga. Again, Obenga is a specialization. When you're talking about African philosophy and things of that nature, again, when you read Intro to Black Studies, or you read the history of Africa, you get introduced to Obenga. And so again, I'm picking texts where you will be introduced to many of our most powerful scholars. And exactly that's advanced work. And so before you start, grabbing on Obenga, you need to learn linguistics. You need to learn how to read and write meta nature. That's a personalization. You may not be interested in learning meta nature and all of that. And so I'm not trying. I'm trying to give you again just general foundational work. Everyone who looks to you or anyone as an authority will just go with that and say it's bad or veer away from it and have no real idea on why they are doing that. I don't know if you're talking to me or somebody else on the chat, and what's the context for your comment. Let me see. Let me go back up. So excuse me if I'm just kind of catching up on the chat here, and thank you to Donnie Williams for your gift and contribution. It is greatly appreciated. Big up and respect to you. Let me see. Trip to my says I definitely need one of Malcolm's books. Again, you're introduced to Malcolm X in these texts. So, from there, if you're interested in Malcolm, you would go read Malcolm. There's no shortage. It's not this is not the end all be all into books. And so people seem to be confused on what a grounding is. And so again, the reason for this text is because, or excuse me, these specific text recommendations is because it's too many times I've entered, and again, I've come into the community as a pseudo, coming from the Hebrew Israelite tradition, and so you when you don't have direction, any and everybody who talks about something black, you just gravitate to. So the objective of this list is to discipline you and to focus you, on learning and understanding what are solid texts. You can tell the difference between solid texts and then texts that are, uh, just kind of put together with ideas that they have not proven and things of that nature, or just to understand somebody's testimony versus deep scholarship. Because now if you are compelled to start writing and stuff like this, now you need to start getting methodology books, so that you can understand certain things. Like I could have recommended writing African history on there, or the text from UNESCO. There's so many books I could have recommended, which is why I update these, every few years. And so these have been pretty solid. And again, these are my recommendations within the framework of the four fundamental questions of life. Who am I? Where did I come from? What is my purpose? And what must I do to fulfill that purpose? Let me see. Uh, Movie guy says Basil Davidson was one of the greatest Afrikaners who, honestly, many black scholars leaned on his work mostly, and him and Johnny Clark were good friends. And indeed, but you can also talk about, you know, like, you need to read the text by Martin Delaney. You need to read text by um, Wesley, Dr. Charles Wesley. There's so many people, but again, if you are just coming into consciousness, you're not going to know these people. The only way that you're going to know these people is if you read the textbooks that attempt to give you a historical, narrative of, our experiences on the continent and in the United States or the UK or in Brazil. And then you see these writings, you see these names. And so some of these texts are kind of specialized, by one person, but you notice that I'm recommending texts that you discover a whole bunch of people. So Milana Karenga's text, he's going to give you all of these folks. Malefe Kitiasante is going to give you these folks. When you read Joseph Holloway, he's just the editor. It's a whole bunch of scholars that are included in that, you know. And then, of course, Doctors Parham, Ajamu, and White. Dr. Naim Akbar, you get introduced to Asahilia because he does the forward, you know. And so when you're dealing with Dr. Malidoma Some and Sabon Some and Dr. Fukiao, you're getting indigenous. You're not getting third party understanding of a particular African spiritual system. And so these things are very important. You get introduced to these critical political thinkers when you read Raylan Rabaka's work on Africana critical theory. You want to learn about, African spirituality in the broader sense. You have Dr. Clyde Ford's Hero with an African Mask, but more so in terms of a relationship to you, in terms of answering the question of what is my purpose? And so, it's when you go through these texts, you'll see why. And then also when you read all 16 of these books, you'll have a low tolerance for pseudo. And that's a serious thing, and that's my objective, to have you to be an anti-pseudo in these YouTube streets. Let me see. Let's see. I thank Donnie Williams already. Let me see. Great Men of Color, volumes 1 and 3. Nope. Great Men of Color. Nope. A Form of Knowledge. I don't know. I do respect method. First book I was recommended was Ma'at by Hugh Kemet. Then Seba on Dr. Claude Anderson book on Powernomics. Powernomics, let me post it right here. Powernomics is a good book, but it pales in comparison to Blueprint for Black Power. I mean, Blueprint for Black Power is the standard, and it kind of has a plan in Powernomics by Dr. Claude Anderson, but Blueprint for Black Power is an actual plan. The book is like 800 or 900 pages. That's why it's recommended last in my collection or in my recommendations of books. And so I had to weigh it against that. And so if I'm going to pick an economic text, I'm going to go with the big boys. So it's Dr. Amos Wilson for me. for this particular recommendation. And matter of fact, it was Chancellor Williams that inspired Blueprint for Black Power. So when you read Blueprint for Black Power, he's going to introduce you to uh, Chancellor Williams and the plan. So he expands on the plan that that Chancellor Williams developed. And so, but I wanted to make sure that Chancellor Williams was there because he helps you to understand more so how we got. Like he's looking for the problems in African culture and the environment and history, and his plan also recommends how to fill in and plug those holes that got us in the condition that we're in currently right now. And so somebody mentioned African Glory by DeGraff Johnson was my first book read I read on history. It's a pretty chill book and might be of his radical politics of CLR James. I appreciate his work. I'm late, but was there recommendations for spiritual practices? Let me, Kali Hercules asked the question or says the statement first. I'm late, but there recommendations for spiritual practices, customs, and norms. Yes. And so the text that I recommended was Malidoma Some, and that was the healing wisdom of Africa. Oh, excuse me, no, that's African Healing and Wisdom, Dr. Malidoma Some. And then also you have Sabonfu Some, the spirit of intimacy, but that's more specifically coming from the Daguerre tradition. Then you have African cosmology of the Bantu Congo. So you have the Bantu Congo perspective, but then you also have the hero with an African face, which is a little bit more broad in terms of African wisdom traditions, which include the Dogon, which include the Yoruba, which includes the icon, and I think there's another Bantu system, and it also looks at, I think the ancient Egyptian, and so the spirituality as well as the psychology and all of that is there. So I try to make sure that I covered, all of my bases from political, spiritual, psychological, historical, and economic, and healing and social work. So, let's see, when we ruled is good as well. Yep. I wouldn't discount psychoanalysis. I don't see in general. Yes, when we ruled is a good synopsis. Then go back and read all the works, books with Robert Walker reference. That's what I'll do. Okay, psychoanalysis is fine, but it is not scientific. It is hard to falsify, which is one of the hallmarks of science. Well, everything doesn't have to be science in that context. And what I mean by that is that some things aren't meant to be falsified. Like when you do social work, you can't do experiments. It's not science. Linguistics is not science unless you're in terms of physical science. Unless you're talking about phonology, for example, it's mathematics, it's logic that has a different type of it has a different type of methodology and things needed. And so this is why these texts are important, why it's important to get methodological texts. So I'm going to do another video for those who have already gotten all the knowledge of self from like these texts, and now they want to get into it and get serious, in terms of going into deeper studies. So now you're going to have to get those methods books. So I'm going to recommend certain methodology books so that you can start understanding, what you're going to have to do and know when you're trying to answer certain questions, because now we're getting into the academic aspect. So all of these are dealing with your personal life. Who am I? Where did I come from? What is my purpose? What must I do to fulfill that purpose? But now you're trying to get into something that is academic, and you probably have an intent to write and publish. So you're going to have to understand methodology. And so now that's a totally separate list of books. And so you're going to have to familiarize yourself with with Afrocentricity and the field of Africology. And you're going to have to get, McDougall's book on African, African methods or research methods in Africana in Africana studies, second edition. You're going to have to get Ukimit Press on research methods. You're going to have to get Writing African History. You're going to have to get UNESCO's Volume 1 and some other texts that I will recommend in terms of research methods. So now you can start understanding the limitations and what certain fields of study are here to answer, because all of them require certain different types of methods, and they have certain other types of theories that govern those particular fields of endeavors. So, you got to understand, these things when you're trying to judge how to evaluate a particular text. If you're dealing with a psychoanalysis type of thing, you can't judge it the same way that you would judge physics, because it doesn't operate by the same mechanisms. And so we have to be clear on that. The philosopher Karl Popper considers psychoanalysis to be a pseudoscience because it has produced so many hypotheses that cannot be refuted empirically. Psychoanalysis could be considered a pseudoscience. I mean, everything we consider pseudoscience, per se, which is why you should fear anything. You don't sit on propaganda and reputations. Okay, y'all having your own debate. And thank you for the comment, Mr. Untouchable. Appreciate it. Skip all y'all psychoanalysis conversation because y'all in another world. And I saw someone sent a donation, and I want to recognize it, but this thing is not. Okay, there we go. So peace and blessings. Thank you, BK Trainer, for your gift and contribution. It is greatly appreciated. Thank you. Let me see. So I'm not seeing any, real questions. What can you say to those who's coming? Okay, hold on. What Maurice, and I apologize if I'm murdering this last name, Cisse, or Chise, I don't know. So I apologize, but you asked, what can you say to those who come into the enlightenment late? Like the recommendations that I have, it has no age. Again, well, I don't know if you were here at the beginning of the conversation, but at the beginning of the conversation, when I was talking about the motivation for this list, it came as a result of engaging people who were coming into the knowledge of self at different time periods in their lives. So some in their early 20s, some as teenagers, some in their 30s. I think the latest was someone in their 60s who had, just, began to abandon the systems, the psychological systems associated with Christianity and things of that nature in their life. And so they were they were looking for texts. And so, these have these in mind. So it wouldn't change no matter, what age you're coming into, in enlightenment. So it just really kind of depends on, what your schedule is and what you're willing to put in. And so, you know, these again, it's a mix in terms of book length. So I tried to make, you know, like some really small that you can read really fast, and then there's others that are kind of big, so that, you know, this isn't a long process, but, you know, it's within a year or so, you know, with diligent reading, you can get through all of these texts. And so you'll be surprised, um, what you can do, you know, when you reduce your time on social media and just read the text. Let me see. Uh, yes, I mean that's Brian Thomas says yes. This is a great list for newcomers, if you will. That's the purpose. So if you, again, if you've been in the game, you know, over 20 years like me, you know, a lot of this stuff will still be relevant, and you know, you may still reference it, but you would have moved way beyond. You know, you are into the Diops, the Obingas, and if you're like me, you switch languages. So you're reading text from Muba Benge Balolo and Ababukri Musalam and Alman Digi and others, and so, you know, you're in a whole different, but I can't recommend those for people who are just coming out, because it's not going to make sense, and they don't have a context. So again, the way in which I articulate this, there's a particular type of context for which these books will help you, you know, personally. So I'm not assuming that everybody who's coming into consciousness are going to be scholars. So I'm not going to be recommending books to you that you will need to know to be a scholar in the field. All of these books are to help you personally, to so that, you know, you find the motivation to utilize your gifts and your skills to kind of move forward and improve your life and your family. And so I hope that, you know, makes sense. Uh, Again, they still in there. The Red Book by Mao Zedong is very good as well. Again, that's a specialization. Let me see. Mama Marimba I Need, still a specialization, but a good book nonetheless. Sway the series, but, you know, but I won't recommend texts that try to make arguments based on melanin. So, you know, some of our revered scholars, a lot of folks will, you know, try to hold up and recommend. I wouldn't do it, because of the whole melanin thing. Uh, it says, I thank you, this brother Chavez. I thank you for making me anti-pseudo, brother Sar. I, I put, I guess you put me on to Amos Wilson. Like if you start off with Amos Wilson, you can't go wrong. All right, this is that's right. So I was supposed to get Blueprint for Black Power on Christmas, but Amazon ran out. I'm pretty sure that, you know, you can find it again. If Amazon, if people are Amazon tripping, try to find, you know, bookstores. You know, look for Black bookstores and see if they carry it. You know, you'd be surprised. See if, I don't know if the Shrine of the Black Madonna is still selling, if they still got the bookstore open in Houston. Call the Shrine of Black Madonna, you know, or call, you know, there's many bookstores you can call in the United States and get these texts. Let's see, pieces are do a show or give a quick tips on how to vet a source. Thanks, and I will. And so make sure. I don't know if you are subscribed to the channel. Can't get right, but if you are not subscribed to the channel, subscribe and make sure that you hit the bell so that when I do the show on how to vet sources, that, you know, you will be one of the first to know. And, you know, so that is a good topic, and I'll take you up on that. What do you think of Cress Welsling Asar? Again, there's a lot of good stuff in her work, but she bases a lot of this stuff on melanin and stuff that can't be proven scientifically. So I honestly can't recommend it, without you having this firm foundation in research methods and stuff to this nature to be able to analyze a Francis Cress Welsing's text. Let's see, you need hardcore facts and science when you can't receive it. You dismiss subjective experience. Listen, a pseudo. Can't qualify again. David Walker's appeal to the colored people. Okay. And let me see. Sorry, I got my hand all in the camera. How do I feel about Yosef Ben Yakinen? I feel that his works in general are good. It's very basic when it comes to Egyptology, and there are some other works that you can read in today's uh, more up to date work has been done since then. So like, I would only recommend Dr. Ben as kind of going back retro, so you'd be familiar with the historical text. Like I wouldn't recommend like J.A. Rogers, for example, now, because we've gotten so much information and so many people have been able to kind of build on some of those ideas and correct those things that I just wouldn't start off there. So, but Dr. Ben is pretty good, but there's other texts that I feel are more rigorous than Dr. Ben. And so, like I would recommend Diop over Dr. Ben um, on those questions. Let me see. Uh, he says, "Wow, so you would consider Know Thyself as a method book? Did I say that it was a method book in the spirit of intimacy? Or I'm not sure you're kind of paying attention to what I'm saying, so I'm not understanding your question." Let me see. Let me see. Marxism. It says, what African anthropology books would you specifically like? I suggested one. Um, you know, I suggested the Africanisms in American culture is one text. Um, but when it comes to some of these other greater works, that is a different text. And so, I can recommend texts all day. Hundreds of books. I know y'all not going to read all these books, but um, and so it just depends on the nature of. So maybe I'll have to just do recommended books by category and by genre. So these are coming into consciousness. Like these are folks who are just really kind of starting off and don't have a firm background in Africana studies. And so this is your intro into Africana studies. And then you can get into more specific work. But then I'm going to have my own recommendations for, and I'll probably just do like a top 7, and not to make them long. So it's just going to be my top 7 given a particular type of genre. So one for Egyptology, one for linguistics, one for, spirituality from an indigenous perspective, and then religion and philosophy from an academic perspective. Like I got texts that I recommend, and then of course my research methods, text. And so that will go on the discussion on how to evaluate text and evidence and the like. So, that'll come in the near future. Uh, Let me see. Says, what about Runoko Rashidi? I'm not too big of a fan of Runoko Rashidi's work, but that's because of my interest. I'm not trying to look for black people everywhere, and so like that just doesn't interest me. It never has. Uh, well, at least once I left the Hebrew Israelites, because Hebrew Israelites try to make everybody black and Hebrew at the same time. But that just hasn't been my interest, like blacks in Asia, because it's really kind of irrelevant in the grand scheme of things, because all of the physical evidence demonstrates that all human beings come out of Africa. Everybody is African. So it's only to be expected that you will probably find some dark skinned folks who look like African people outside of the continent of Africa, because all of us migrated and there's mutations over time that made our phenotypes look different. And so, it's ultimately it's irrelevant. What's relevant for me is culture, psychology, semantics, language, and because that's how you distinguish people, and that's my motivation and what I'm interested in terms of my personal research. Uh, let me see, and understand, like, if some of y'all have an issue with saying one of these two works, there's no such thing as a perfect work. You're going to disagree with something in everybody's work. So we're not looking for perfection. We're looking just for strong arguments, strong cases, strong articulations of the particular perspective and its potential usage in our personal lives. Let's see. So yeah, I mean, I guess I'll leave it at that. And so I'm just going to say thank you all for listening, and my recommendations are in the description below. So it's already, I've copied and pasted it there. And so, if you come back, you don't have to listen to the whole video. You can just copy and paste the book recommendations in from the description below. And so I thank each and every one of you for listening, and please like and share this video and continue to advance the conversation. And if y'all have read the books, leave a comment on what you thought about some of the books that I've recommended, and then of course what books that you would recommend. So you leave that in the comment section. And so with that said, here is my contact information. And again, I'll be doing a show with Dr. Dao Kaya, Egyptologist, scribe, and Meta-Netra teacher out of Cameroon. And so we'll be talking all that Black Egyptian Meta-Netra stuff. And you're only going to get it if you're on the Patreon page. And so thank you all for your support. And, again, here is if you have any questions or want to get up with me, further, these are my social media handles. And, and then, of course, my website. And I guess that's the Cash App if you want to bless this channel with a donation. So I appreciate you all. Y'all have a blessed night, and continue to wear your mask and be safe and avoid all the pseudos, as much as possible. All right, peace.